and welcome back to Calle's Chronicles, where you and I get to spend 10 super intimate minutes just listening to my thoughts and ideas and having ourselves a time. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about stereotyping and prejudice. And I don't know about you, but when I hear the word stereotyping, my mind kind of does go back to the Martin Luther King Jr. era. I start to think of the 50s, civil rights, when we were more outwardly discriminatory, schools were segregated, times were a little bit different. You may be thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, I can't believe people actually live like that. That's crazy that, we were having, separate drinking fountains. The thing is, times really haven't changed all that much. It's just people are a little bit more cautious. They just know how to hide it better, is what a lot of studies have found. So today we're gonna look into that and talk about a couple concepts. We're gonna talk about something called perceptual bias. Now, if you haven't heard of this term, it means that actual group membership is irrelevant. We judge people based on their perceived group membership, meaning someone could look like a nerd, but maybe, based on whatever you think that means, but maybe they're not even actually in STEM, or they just could have none of those actual traits, right? But as long as they look like one, they may as well be one. That's kind of how our brains work. So a study that we actually went over in class had to do with how American is Barack Obama. This was conducted in 2013. As the study quotes, "The label American is more swiftly granted to people of European descent than to members of ethnic minorities. People tend to associate the idea of Americanness, think bald eagles, American flags, white people with white people." So they took 4 powerful politicians at the time, which were obviously Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John McCain, and Tony Blair, who is not American at all. Okay, Tony Blair was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Aside from this study itself, there was also survey data that showed the more white respondents expressed an attachment to US symbols, the less likely they were to vote for Obama. Meaning, people already had this predisposition to not view him as super American. In this study, they measured people's implicit biases. Basically, people aren't going to be, as I said, outwardly racist nowadays because that's frowned upon. So instead, we figured out a way to do tests by showing you pictures really fast of people's faces, some black, some white, and then clicking good or bad, and that's a very, very simplified version of what they do, but essentially they're trying to get your unconscious mind out, right? Because again, we would never say these things. What we show through nonverbal things, that's more where we're gonna see, oh, okay, this is what you really think. So the results showed that people had difficulty seeing Obama as an American, extent to which he was construed as a black person. Interesting, right? This idea was so extreme in terms of whiteness being equated to Americanness that people rated Tony Blair, who again doesn't even live in the United States, all right, as more American than America's president at the time. Think of how crazy that is, all because of the association of whiteness with Americanness. Obviously, Barack Obama is way more American than Tony Blair. Like, that is an insane result. This is a great example of perceptual bias because, again, how we see someone based on their exterior is not based on actual facts or knowledge, or in this case, Americanness. I also wanted to talk about attributions. So we have 2 types. We have internal and external. Internal is when we associate the cause of someone's behavior to their person or group, right? So you would say, oh, Jessica's great because she's so intelligent, or she did that because she's so smart. Whereas an external attribution doesn't have to do with them. You would say, oh, Jessica did well in that test because of good luck, not because of her actual intelligence. These concepts lead us to the ultimate attribution error, the mismatch between in-group attributions and out-group attributions in such a way to preserve all of the positives of in-groups as due to their character and all of the negatives of out-groups as due to their character. An example of this would be, again, obviously I go to Ohio State, so our rival school is Michigan. This would be like saying Michigan students party in their free time because they're careless, again, relating it to personality. Whereas OSU students party in their free time because they're extroverted and open-minded, also about their personality, but see how it's positive, and the other one is serving in a negative way. So a real-world example of these concepts is just giving ourselves our own ego boost. I know I do this all the time. If I ever do something, if I have a joke that lands super funny, that's me. I'm funny as hell. But if someone else does, I'd be like, oh, they took that from somewhere. Like, you know what I mean? We tend to always discredit other people, especially people, as I said, it's all about perception, that we perceive as an outsider or a different group than us. I previously mentioned the Barack Obama study where people found him less American based on his skin color versus his actual Americanness. And I thought it'd be interesting to see if I could find any other studies about just stereotyping. I found this study called Sex Differences in Attitudes Towards Gay Men and Lesbians, a multi-dimensional perspective. So I was actually originally looking to just see stereotypes in like gay men specifically. I wanted to see if I could find any research about that specific flamboyant stereotype, where we got that from, where that's displayed in films and stuff. But instead I landed here, and in this study they were looking at 4 different traits: condemnation / tolerance, morality, contact, and stereotype. They found that for all factors except stereotypes, men were less tolerant of homosexuality than women. On the scale of contact, women reported to be less comfortable around a lesbian versus a gay man, and for men it was the opposite, which I thought was really interesting. Like, I guess that might be a little bit fear-based. It's also important to note the study was done in 1998, so if we think back to late 90s, times were a little bit different back then. That was about 25 years ago, so I would be very curious to see people's attitudes now, because I think they would be hopefully a lot different. The study found a lot of evidence that men were more homophobic than women, especially specifically towards gay men. They didn't seem to care as much when it came to lesbians, which might be due to some slightly erotic element. We don't know. That's to be explored. I found the stereotyping to be interesting because women stereotyped more than men. That was the only one. So I thought that was interesting, like why women do. Again, we don't know, and based on the study we can't say, but I did just think this was interesting to note. I guess how far we've come, and also how homophobic men are. I didn't realize. Studies like this remind us to look inward when we feel discomfort towards people that we perceive as different than us. Why might we feel this way, right? Are there past experiences with a specific person from this group that we may have overgeneralized? No matter what the cause, it's always important to recognize when we feel disapproving, because as I mentioned, condemnation was rated the highest with men. So just condemnation is very specific. It's not just saying, oh, I wouldn't do that. It's like, you are wrong for doing that, like condemning someone. But I regress. Psychology and concepts about how we engage with others socially is always going to be relevant because of how social in nature humans are. When it comes to issues like stereotyping, many people are unaware that they're doing it, or maybe they've fooled themselves into thinking it's all buried down. But the funny thing about psychology is that even though we are looking at the brain and internal, it's actually all because of what we display physically. So it could be the slightest little eye twitch or an eyebrow raise, and psychologists are able to measure that. And for me personally, psychology has been so helpful in just everything, but I would say I found it the most beneficial in my friendships. I'm not saying I'm some kind of love doctor, but I will say understanding like attachment styles and childhood trauma, things like that, when my friends will tell me stuff, or people they're dating, I'm like, oh, red flag, he has mommy issues, that comes from this, you know what I mean? I'm just able to spot things like that. I find that entertaining and helpful, and they do too. I think being socially aware not only helps you become a better person, but it also, as I said, helps you become a better friend, daughter, mentor, whatever you want to be, or in my case, a therapist or friends. As one of my favorite YouTubers always says, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.